So if you take the negative connotation out of this particular article, I do think it is an interesting thing to be thinking about the future of artificial intelligence, the valuations of companies OpenAI and Anthropic, and basically the idea of how should AI architecture be built. So Chrome is quietly downloading a 4 gig AI model without your permission. So I kind of think this is interesting, and it is one of my big questions about what is the value proposition for OpenAI, right? One of the things we talk about in the technology world is you have the technology. So there's a technology, something like TCP/IP, web browsers, web servers, that type of thing. You have the product, and the product is what you package up to be able to sell. And then you have the business itself, where you try to sell that product basically at scale. And one of the things I've talked about before is you can have an amazing technology that you just can't turn into a good product. Or you can have an amazing technology that you can turn into a good product, but you can't figure out how to make it a viable business, right? That's an important thing to consider. Think about this with Silicon Dojo. So I was doing Silicon Dojo, free to the end user technology education. I actually made it work. I actually figured out how to get into the black. But I had to do it in Durham, North Carolina. So I drove all the way to Durham, North Carolina, driving 3.5 hours each way. So basically it's an idea. So the technology is education, the product is the classes that I was creating, and the business is Silicon Dojo itself. And the problem that I ran into is I could get into the black, I could get growth, I could get support, I could get all those things 3.5 hours away. And it just killed me. I did it for 7 months and I just couldn't do it anymore. Again, the business didn't work. And that's one of those things you got to consider. So that's one of my concerns with OpenAI is that their valuation of $1 trillion. They won an IPO of $1 trillion. And the thing is, the technology is the LLMs, right? The LLMs, the models, that type of thing. The product is either ChatGPT or the OpenAI APIs. And then you have the business itself. And one of the problems that OpenAI has is basically what is its funnel to get to the customer, to get to the users. Right? So back when ChatGPT first came out, it was basically the only product out there. So everybody went to it because that if you want to use AI, that's where you go. The curious thing that I find nowadays is the AI that I probably use the most is actually Google's Gemini API. And the weird part about it is I don't want to use it most of the time. Like literally, I go to Claude, I go to other services because I want to use them. Most of the time, I'm using Google's AI and I don't even want to use it. And why? Because they build it into the search engine. Google is still the best place to go to get most answers. So basically, I type my query. What I really want is a list of websites. Instead of getting a list of websites, I get an AI response. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but I end up using Google's AI, again, a lot, even when I don't want to, because I already have the process in place. When I have a question, I go to Google. And so I think this is a big problem that OpenAI has, is basically the question of what is their funnel to customers. And so you think about this like with web browsers. So these different AI, quote unquote AI companies have been coming out with their own web browsers. OpenAI has one, Perplexity has one, the whole 9 yards. And the idea is, look, you use our web browser and the AI is built in. But here's a funny thing about customers. Users, I don't want another web browser. I just don't, right? I personally use Safari. You see that I use Safari most of the time. I use Safari. Maybe I use Chrome. I also have Chrome on this. I don't use Firefox or anything else. Like I've used these AI companies' browsers a little bit, but the fact of the matter, again, I have a workflow. I have a way of doing things. I know when I click on something how it's supposed to work. I don't want to learn another web browser. So what's interesting with Google, right? Google getting into this whole AI arms race is they already own a massive amount of the browser market. Just like I go to Google, even though it's in Safari, I go to Google to ask questions on Google and I get an AI response. Right, basically with Chrome, you have they already have a tremendous number of people that are using Chrome already. So isn't it easier to quote unquote sell to a customer if they're already using a product, adding a piece of functionality into that product so they start using it more versus trying to convince people to go to an entirely different product? And this is one of the reasons I think Google is going to be one of the major winners for this particular race is people are already used to using Google, so Google can simply add AI functionality into the product that they're already using. It's almost like iPhones or like the Apple devices, right? People already own Apple devices. Apple adds AI functionality to the device. It makes the device more valuable. I'm not going to go out and buy an AI device like with OpenAI, right? Again, they're talking about coming out with their own hardware, right? There's going to be OpenAI hardware. I'm just not gonna buy it. Like I already have an iPhone. I already have an iPhone. The iPhone does 99% of the crap that I need it to do. If iPhone adds AI, then I'll use the AI. I might even be willing to pay for AI in the future. I'm not gonna go out and spend a few $100 on somebody else's device. And this is kind of one of those things to kind of be considering. Anyways, if we take a look at this, just go through. Google Chrome offers plenty of AI features, but some of them could quietly eat up your device storage. As spotted by Privacy Guy, the browser automatically downloads a 4 gig model to support on-device AI features, and it may stay on your PC unless the features are turned off. The AI model in question is Gemini Nano, a lighter version of Google's Gemini model that runs on your computer to support features such as writing assistance, web page summary, scam detection, and tab organization. If you opt into these features, Chrome will download a file named weights.bin in the blah blah folder without notifying you. According to the Privacy Guide, the file gets downloaded when you run Chrome 147. Quote, while this requires some local space on the desktop to run, the model will automatically uninstall if the device is low on resources, Google said. Quote, in February, we began rolling out the ability for users to easily turn off and remove the model directly in Chrome settings. Once disabled, the model will no longer download or update. And so this is kind of an interesting thing, right? So basically, this then gets built into Chrome. So now you're just automatically using Google's models, even if you didn't particularly want to use Google's models. The other thing that I think is interesting about this, when you start looking at this from an architecture standpoint, right? All these companies are going out, all these AI companies are going out, and they're spending hundreds of billions of dollars on architecture. $200 billion, right? So yesterday I did a video, Anthropic made a commitment with SpaceX for $200 billion of AI infrastructure. And that's on top of all the other AI infrastructure that's getting built out. One of the things that I've been talking about for a while, though, is I have a big question on the value of this from just an architecture standpoint. Is AI being architected in a resource-efficient fashion? And I just simply do not believe it is. One of the things that came up in the All In podcast, I talk about this. I do my little elliptical in order to get my blood pressure up. I listen to Jason Calacanis and his gang of douchebags. But anyways, I think it was David Sachs was talking about how the idea that the models are going to get more efficient over time and will require 10x fewer resources in the future than they do now. So his argument is that by buying all of this infrastructure now, that is future-proofing these AI companies so that they will have enough resources in the future. But one of my arguments is, right, so this is a $5,000, this is the 128 gig M5 MacBook Pro. This can run GPT OSS 120 120 parameter, whatever, 120 gig parameter model on it. Right? And the thing is, so this is $5,000. So if you made models 5x more efficient, then essentially you could run GPT OSS on a $500 computer going into the future. And then if I can run GPT 120 billion parameter model on a $500 computer, why would I want to connect to OpenAI systems? Right, something to be considering here. And so I think that's an interesting thing, like from Google's architecture standpoint. If it's a 4 gig file that they're downloading, that's probably somewhere between a 6 billion parameter to an 8 billion parameter model. Those are pretty big models. Again, we talk about small models. So small models are generally under a gig in size. So if you're talking about 4 gigs, this is probably a 6 to 8 billion parameter model, which means it can actually do a lot of stuff on your computer. So if Google creates an architecture where they can run as much resource-intensive tasks on your system as possible, then that massively decreases the loads on their system. Think about this in the coding world. We talk about front-end languages and back-end languages. So back-end languages like Python or PHP or something like that, that all runs on your server. A front-end language is something like JavaScript. Essentially, text is sent from your server, just a text file sent from your server to the user's browser. The browser then renders the website, basically turns that text into code. Basically, why you do that is because all of the resource consumption then is on the client computer. It's not on your backend server. You multiply this. I know you're sitting here thinking about these are web pages. Who the hell cares? But you think about a major website, a little bit of efficiency improvement over millions of visitors per day can actually mean you need a few fewer racks of servers, can save you a lot of money. So think about this, and that's an architecture, that's a design style. So think about if we start architecting artificial intelligence that way. How much can we push to the end user's computer to run locally so that only the tasks that the local computer can't do will be sent to the servers? If simply going from Python to JavaScript can save hardware resources, imagine simply offloading a whole crap of AI tasks to the local computer, how many resources that will save. And so this is going to be the interesting thing looking at this AI arms race. And I think this is far more interesting. Frontier models and all that kind of stuff, whatever. Frontier models is all 2025. I think what's going to be really interesting is this whole architecture design, and it's going to be related around, you know, what is the workflow people are already using? What are the products and services that people are already using? How can artificial intelligence be integrated into people's day-to-day lives as they're currently doing them? And then as those products and that functionality starts getting added to those products, how then can things like AI tasks start being offloaded to people's computers? Again, to massively reduce the infrastructure cost for these AI companies, a company like Google. And that's where I think at the end of the day, Google's a winner on this. I think Apple's a winner on this. I think Microsoft is a winner on this. Maybe AWS, they're more of the infrastructure play. But I think what we're going to see at the end of the day is kind of like basically what happens with so many of these technology arms races. Is in the beginning you see a lot of upstart companies and everybody's excited because those upstart companies are gonna upend how everything works. And then what you find is the old-fashioned, large, multi-trillion-dollar companies that already exist. They're the ones that actually win the particular race. So it'll be interesting to see basically how this goes. How do you feel about this? How do you feel about Chrome? And basically going to Chrome, and with Chrome, you will literally have AI models already installed on your computer. What do you think about that? With so many of the processes actually running locally, and then only things that aren't working on your system will get sent up to their servers. Which business plan architecture style do you think will win? If you support technology, what do you think? What kind of disaster do you think this will be? I will find this interesting. One of the big problems you run into with these technology companies is they always care about their products. They don't care about anybody else's products. So if you have a 4 gig model on your computer, if that loads, that's burning 4 gigs of RAM. So in a time period where RAM is becoming ever more in short supply, it'll burn 4 gigs of RAM just for that model when it fires up. So how many people's computers do you think are going to go from working pretty normally to all of a sudden they start using Google Chrome? And this is what always happens. I have no idea what happened. My computer is working fine, and then I open up Google Chrome and the computer becomes a brick. Do you think that is going to happen in the Google Chrome world? I don't know. Put your thoughts down below. If you like these episodes, do remember they're on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. Links for that is in the doobly-doo. Also, there's a link down below for LinkedIn if you want to follow me with the other things that I do. With that, see y'all later.